Okay, let's dive right in. What if the toughest parts of your life, the friction, the pressure, the suffering, what if they weren't just random bugs in the system, but actually the entire point of it? We're about to unpack a way of thinking that could reframe everything you thought you knew about being human.
So, let's start with a really big question, one that kind of challenges our most basic assumption. What if this whole life, with all its wins and all its losses, isn't the main event at all? What if it's just the prelude? And that question leads to a really fascinating paradox. Some of the most rigorous, logical minds on the planet, our top scientists, they eventually hit a wall. Science is absolutely brilliant at explaining the mechanics of the universe, the how. But the deeper it goes, the more it bumps up against a question it was just never built to answer. Why?
And that brings us to our first section, which is all about that paradox. It's about these top-tier scientists who started out as atheists, totally determined to explain away all the mystery, only to find themselves at the end of their search standing face to face with it.
I mean, take the renowned astronomer Alan Sandage. This guy spent his entire life measuring the cosmos, and it wasn't some leap of faith that changed his mind from atheism to belief. It was the data. The sheer baffling precision of it all just led him to one conclusion, that science itself was pointing to a reality far too complex for science alone to ever explain.
Or look at Fred Hoyle, another giant in astronomy. He's the one who famously calculated the odds of life just happening from some primordial soup by pure chance. And his conclusion? It was statistically absurd. He said it was less likely than a tornado sweeping through a junkyard and perfectly assembling a Boeing 747. It just wasn't going to happen.
And this quote just captures the idea perfectly. Max Planck, one of the founders of quantum physics, he put it so well. He said, for a person of faith, God is where you start, but for a physicist, God is the final destination you arrive at, but only after you followed the chain of evidence all the way to its logical end.
So the crucial point here is this split. Science completely owns the question of how. It explains the physical laws, the mechanics, the nuts and bolts of reality. But it's the why, that question of purpose, of intention behind it all, that's what pushes these great thinkers beyond the limits of pure materialism and toward a more spiritual perspective.
Okay, so if the universe has some intention behind it, what does that mean for our own ending? Well, this brings us to our next section, where we explore what happens after we die and the accounts from near-death experiences. They paint a picture that is, well, chillingly consistent.
The core principle that comes back from these experiences is both really simple and honestly kind of terrifying. The afterlife isn't a fresh start. It's not an escape button. It's an amplifier. The spiritual and emotional state you build up here on Earth, all your joy and love, but also all your pain and despair, it gets magnified by a factor of 10 the moment you cross over.
And this has some really profound consequences. For people who end their own lives to escape suffering, the evidence from these NDEs suggests it backfires, catastrophically. Instead of finding relief, they report being trapped in an infinite loop of their final moments of despair, amplified 10 times over, in this dark, isolated world that's just a direct reflection of their own mind.
So this leads to a pretty stark conclusion. The pain we face in this life isn't a problem we're supposed to just get rid of or a bug in the system. It's part of the curriculum. You can't bypass it. It has to be transformed right here. So if we can't escape our hardships, then what on earth is their purpose? This brings us to the central metaphor of this entire way of thinking, the diamond in the grindstone. It's a total shift in how we look at the very purpose of being alive. Okay, let's look at two completely different ways to see a lifetime. On one hand, you have the material paradigm we're all familiar with. In that view, suffering is just bad luck. Work is a transaction for money. Difficult people are just enemies you have to defeat. And death? Well, death is the end. Game over. But in the immortal paradigm, the meaning of everything flips. Suffering becomes a tool. Work becomes a spiritual practice. Difficult people become mirrors. And death is just a transition, amplifying the state you're already in.
And here is the core of it all. Life, with all its friction and all its pressure, is the grindstone. Your soul, your mind, that's the diamond. And every hardship, every failure, every moment of grief isn't a punishment. It's the precise, necessary abrasion that's needed to polish you. The whole point isn't to avoid the grindstone. It's to use it to create a brilliance that lasts forever.
Think of it like this. We spend our entire lives collecting things that get left behind. Status, money, possessions. None of it is coming with you. The only thing you can actually take to the next world is the state of your heart, the state of your mind. So in that light, the work of polishing that diamond, it's not just important. It's the only thing that is.
Okay, so this is a really beautiful philosophy, right? But how do you actually live it? What does this look like on a Tuesday afternoon? Let's get practical. This section is a playbook for how to apply this immortal paradigm to your actual everyday life.
All right, let's start with your work. True, lasting success isn't about raw talent. It's about a kind of systematic, spiritual effort. Take the actor Takuya Kimura. He never even brings a script to the set. Why? Because he doesn't just memorize the lines. He does the relentless, unseen work to internalize the character's soul. That's treating your job not just as a career, but as a crucible for building empathy and a deep understanding of people.
Now, what about difficult people? Yes, this is one of the toughest parts of that grindstone. The spiritual insight here is that the real danger isn't their ego, it's your reaction to it. The moment you react with anger or get defensive, you sync up to their negative frequency. It's called the law of resonance, and it literally means you are absorbing their toxic energy into your own system.
So how do you defend yourself? The framework is called spiritual Aikido. It's got 4 steps. Step 1, recognize that pull, that internal urge to react. Step 2, disconnect from their negative vibe. Find even a tiny grain of truth in what they're saying and silently wish them well. Step 3, if it keeps going, give a gentle, indirect hint. And step 4, only as a last resort, deliver a firm boundary, but do it as a conscious act without any anger. So this all comes together in what we can call the Immortal Mind Matrix. It's a pretty simple guide for how to live today as if eternity really does matter. For your work, stop chasing praise and start treating your tasks as a training ground for empathy. For your conflicts, stop fighting egos and start seeing difficult people as mirrors for your own pride. And for your hardships, stop looking for an escape and start leaning into the friction, knowing that it's polishing the only thing you actually get to keep.
And that leaves us with one final thought. You see, this isn't really about becoming immortal. According to this way of thinking, you already are. So the only real question left to answer is how brightly are you going to choose to shine?